What?
I was just thinking. I was thinking about how Howie Mandel played Gizmo.
I'm glad. Out of the blue.
I'm sorry.
Please. Okay. Well, I'm Adam.
And I'm Adrian.
And welcome to Guest from the Crypt.
Today we are talking about The Faculty.
I'm so excited. The Faculty, 1998, and don't you forget it.
There's no way you could. I don't even know how to open this up.
Wow, so we watched this movie called The Faculty. Okay, this movie released on Christmas Day in 1998. And it's when you watch this movie, you are violently aware that yes, this movie takes place in 1998. It's directed by Robert Rodriguez, but it is not written by Robert Rodriguez, and I feel like you can tell there's a lot of there's a Rodriguez flair that isn't so much here. The movie's super over the top, which is very Robert Rodriguez, but it's missing that essential Rodriguez oomph, I feel like. I don't know.
That's fair. I think I did see a little... You're right. It didn't feel like it was written by Robert Rodriguez, but for me, it did feel like it was directed by him. Some of the camera work, like the slow zooms in on characters' faces. There's a zaniness behind the camera that I largely attribute to his direction. I think what's interesting is that this movie was written by Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream, Scream 2, and then later on wrote Scream 4. He also wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is another movie that you watch and like you cannot forget that it came out in the year it did. Which I think, I don't know.
I think
1999 or 2000.
Yeah, I think it's like 2000, 2001.
Yeah, or it might be 97. He might have done it the year prior to this one, but nonetheless, like it's just very much of the era. And that's something that made me really enjoy this movie. How antiquated this is. You actually recommended this movie.
Yeah, so I had a blast watching this movie, and like 90% of the joy I got from it was just from it being so cartoonishly 98. This movie, the script was not originally written by Kevin Williamson, but after Scream came out, which was, I think, 2 years prior to this, he was ruling the world, so they threw him in on the script. He rewrote a lot of it, and he wrote the dialogue and evidently even added a few characters. And you can tell it feels like this older gentleman trying to sound hip a lot of the times.
Yeah, it's rough. Kevin Williamson also wrote for shows like Dawson's Creek, and they all suffer from this same thing where it's clear that a boomer wrote these characters that are supposed to be high schoolers, and they're obviously never actually high school aged. They're always played by 20-somethings.
Oh, yeah.
So it's an added layer of inauthenticity to the performances. And for you and I'm pretty sure this is by no means a negative thing. I mean, that's what adds to the charm of these movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really... Scream is, it's a more or less black comedy. It's a satire, so you can forgive the cast being ridiculously old in that one. I always say there's a scene where, I forget her name, but the main girl in Scream is standing next to Courtney Cox, and she's supposed to be in high school, and Courtney Cox is supposed to be this news reporter, and they look the same age. And
Yeah.
this movie suffers from that a lot. I think Elijah Wood is in it. And if my math is correct, he's 40 now, so he would have been 16 when this movie came out, which I think makes him the only cast member that actually would be in high school out of everybody here. And he looks incredibly young, but his youth enhances everybody else's age, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. It's like, why are you standing next to a 30-year-old in the locker room?
Yeah.
Which I'm exaggerating, of course. They're probably like early 20s. But next to Elijah Wood, who is a real life hobbit. He's incredibly small, incredibly young looking, even still at 40. It's exacerbated by the fact.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in these movies, I guess the strategy is like, if you need someone to look kind of meek, just get a normal high schooler and then put him next to a full-grown man. And then he'll look a little smaller also.
It'll do the trick.
Yeah.
For sure. It's a timepiece. If you were to create a time capsule, I think the faculty should go in like a 1998, 1999 time capsule.
Oh, you want to talk time capsule? You know what I would put in that time capsule?
What?
Zeke's freaking hair. There's a character named Zeke with this messed up 90s hair. It looks horrible. It looks so dated.
Yeah, it's really bad. There's a lot to talk about Zeke.
Yeah, it's like bowl cut in the front and then in the back flares out. It's ridiculous.
I can't even describe it, to be honest with you. And that's not the worst thing about Zeke, in my opinion. Like, his hair is bad, but the writing surrounding that character is the biggest sin in this entire movie.
Yeah. Well, it begins with the hair. It escalates from there. And that's already like a 10.
So before we get into the meat and potatoes, I would like to talk about this cast, because this is a star-studded cast. And that's not a joke. Like, there is a lot of household names in this movie. There is like a large cast of younger actors that, if you keep up with early 2000s, late 90s media, then you've definitely seen them around. But notably, Salma Hayek is in this movie, which is crazy. Usher is in this movie, and he's in it for a very brief amount of time. He like maybe has 20 minutes of screen time. Elijah Wood, of course, as we had mentioned. And then, most random of all, Jon Stewart is in this movie. Jon Stewart of Daily Show fame plays a science teacher. That was a curveball for me. I mean, Usher was already super weird, but Jon Stewart being in this movie in particular was just odd.
His whole character was so odd, too. Let's get a little bit into the meat and potatoes so we have more context with
For
these
sure.
characters. Do you want to give us a rundown of the basic plot?
Sure. All right. So, essentially, the movie surrounds Harrington High School, which is a high school in a sleepy little Ohio town where football is king, and there really isn't much outside of football. They do set that up pretty well in the beginning of the movie. And we actually open on a football practice, and we meet the football coach, Coach Willis, very early on in the movie. And the events set in place start when Coach Willis is met by some mysterious figure. We cut to black, and then we have an opening sequence with Coach Willis displaying some really interesting, violent behavior. And I don't want to get too much into it yet, because we do learn more about his violent behavior and the faculty's violent behavior later on. But essentially what this movie boils down to is a alien invasion movie, largely inspired by movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and so on. But the difference is that it takes place in this little microcosm of a small Ohio town in a small high school. And students are left to figure out what's going on. And we, of course, have a ragtag cast of characters that would never work together otherwise, but are now paired together in hopes to survive.
Yeah, and to save the school.
To save the school, and honestly, to save the world. The way that we're actually introduced to the species, this alien species, is we have the resident nerd character played by Elijah Wood. I'm blanking on his name.
Casey.
Yes, thank you. Casey. And Casey, on the football field, because he eats lunch there because he's a loner and a nerd and blah, 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 he finds the little krill-looking parasite. And he actually takes it to his science teacher, Mr. Furlong, played by Jon Stewart. And this is where we first see the parasite in action outside of the hosts that we do see throughout the movie. So they drop it in a fish tank with water, and you learn that it responds well to water. And you can also see it shooting out its little tendrils. And these parasites don't look good. Like,
oh my God. Horrible CGI.
They're entirely CGI. I don't think there is a practical effect in the movie outside of a creature that comes out later in the last act of the film. Man, these little parasites, the grubs that they have, are brutal to look at.
All of the effects in this movie, I think, are horrible. There's not a good effect in this movie.
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Really bad. I don't know when Slither came out, but there is a fair comparison to be made with this movie and Slither. The parasites don't even look as good as the ones in Slither, and Slither is not a good-looking film. It's a great film, but it's not good-looking.
Well, I think Slither has a few practical effects. There's some times where it really does look good. When they use practical effects, when they care about the creatures. This movie, they don't seem to care about the creatures as much as they care about this very cheap theme of, like, they're being absorbed into a conformist hive mind, and they gotta be edgy high schoolers and fight them. And that's more of the focus on this movie.
And it's effective. You forgive the lack of effects in this film. Because I know I did. I actually, in fact, it might have made me enjoy it even more. Now, this movie, as far as 1998 goes, didn't have a small budget. A $15 million budget for one of these late 90s horror films is fairly sizable. And I'd say pretty standard. But I don't know what it is. I mean, these little bugs that really couldn't have been difficult to create. I mean, maybe in 98, I don't know, but they look just awful.
I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves in the plot. You know, we're talking about Mr. Furlong and Casey and all this, but before we're introduced to any of the actual high school students who are the main characters, we first have this opening scene. It's a faculty meeting. Principal Drake is just telling every single member of the faculty that they do not have money for any of the things that they wanted to. The budget is stripped. Nothing except football is funded, because football is what makes the big bucks in this little town. And then she starts walking away. Everybody leaves. For whatever reason, this is a very late at night meeting. The coach shows up, stabs her in the hand with a pencil, and she's trying to escape the high school. It's just her and the coach in the high school. All the doors are locked. She left her keys in her office. She's running around trying to escape. She's fighting back. And this scene is... I really enjoyed this scene. It's the most effective horror in the whole movie. I feel like tonally it's very different than the rest of the movie. And just seeing the struggle, the in-the-moment action of this woman trying to escape her attacker, it's very engrossing. It's a really good hook, this beginning, and it's pretty different than the rest of the movie, admittedly. But I really enjoyed it. How'd you feel about the opening?
No, I agree. I thought the editing was tight. The shots were great. There's a lot of great shots of, Coach Willis down the dark hallway. Very quintessential horror shot, but still really, really good camera work here. As a viewer, you really feel everything that the principal is feeling, which is indicative of, great direction, great camera work, snappy editing in a kind of high octane, scary sequence of this nature. I'd also say that the twist at the end of the sequence is pretty solid. The principal, of course, is trying to escape from Coach Willis, who is just suddenly violent and doing everything he can to kill her. And at the end of this long, dark corridor, there is a door, but it's chained shut. And she, of course, is rushing to get through the chains and also lock them up again so that she can keep Coach Willis away. Well, on the other side of the door is the drama teacher, who we met previously in the very beginning of the movie during a staff meeting. And, she's doing a great job of saying, get out, clearly trying to save the principal. But when the principal steps outside, the twist is that the drama teacher is also in on it, and she ends up stabbing her to death with a pair of scissors. So it's interesting because you think that's her salvation. You think that, that's the person on the other end that can help her. But once she gets out, she is ultimately killed regardless. I think it's a really strong scene.
Yeah, and it subverted my expectations. She escapes the coach. And I was like, oh man, she escaped. And then this old, meek theater teacher, she's dressed like Miss Frizzle, like schoolhouse teacher, stabs her to death, and you really don't expect it. But then we cut to, and this is where we're introduced to the high schoolers. Cut to, it's a school day. School is just about to start. Everybody's going to class. Cue The Offspring starts playing in the background, I think.
I knew you would love that.
Wow. I was like,
of you immediately.
Yeah, I was amazed when that happened.
Yeah, I thought of you immediately. There's a lot of very choice.
Yes.
1998 music in this
Oh,
movie.
yeah, they play Pearl Jam at one point.
Dude, they play... So, I actually have the list right here.
Thank God. Please.
They play a cover, and they actually play it throughout the entire opening sequence right after the faux cold open. I don't know if you caught it, but they play like the bass line of Another Brick in the Wall.
Yes, they do. Yeah. No, I did catch that.
But the catch is that it's a cover of Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, by the band Class of 99, which I don't know if you know who Class of 99 is, but it's literally a band comprised of the vocalist from Alice in Chains, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, this drummer from the band James Addiction, and the keyboardist from Matchbox 20. I think I'm missing someone, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
It's like an all-star group of the bands from the 90s.
The all-star group of 1998, 99, yeah.
Dude, it's insane. And then, of course, you have the Offspring song. There's I'm 18, which is an Alice Cooper song, but that's not the version that makes it into this movie. It's a version by Creed. Dust off that one and remember Creed.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
I could keep going, but I won't. There's some crazy music in this.
Yeah, no, this movie was for the kids.
Yeah.
It's so like that 90s idea of like rebel high schooler, blah, 90s. Oh, it reeks of that. Reeks of that culture that really was put on the kids more so than it was like actual kids culture, I feel like.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know. Even in, we grew up in the 2000s. How much stuff as a kid did you see that was just like slime, blood? This is what kids like. And now I question, I don't think kids like that. I think they just said kids like that. I don't think kids were really like this. I think they just said they were.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my siblings were not high school aged in the 90s, but, we're certainly growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. We're teenagers. And I don't think this is realistic behavior at all.
No, this is a cartoon.
And for me, it doesn't really... No wonder I've never heard of this movie. Like, I don't think people connect to this unironically. I think this is the sort of thing that's right up our alley, where we discover it late in life, way after we were supposed to discover it.
Yeah.
And then we make fun of it.
Yeah, if I was to watch this in 1998, I'd probably hate it.
Me too. Exactly. And that's the thing with movies like this, is you see them so much later when these are such obvious tropes, and they almost accrue value in that amount of time. Like, they're almost saved by their age.
They really are. Yeah, it becomes funny and really enjoyable in a bad way. Like, it's a movie that's so bad it's good, laughable. And that's probably its entire fan base nowadays. It has to be.
Oh, yeah. No one likes this movie unironically.
Yeah, well, even then, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, exactly. I have no clue.
But, yeah, it feels like they're very much trying to relate to the kids. Like, that's the number one thing they're trying to do, and it's the number one thing they're failing at. Yeah, but as this scene opens, and we get the bass line of Another Brick in the Wall playing, we are in this bizarre sequence introduced to every one of the important characters by, like, a long single shot panning around the schoolyard, just focusing on certain characters, and then, like, pausing the movie and throwing up their name, and then continuing the movie. And it's ridiculous. I laughed so hard the first time I watched this and I saw that ridiculous sequence. It's very fun.
I was watching this movie at like 7:30 a.m. with a cup of coffee in my hand, and that made me put down the coffee and like truly tune in.
It was great.
Yeah, it's I tell you, it's quite the hook. Let me tell you, the first 30 minutes of this movie are like riding a rocket. It's like, wow, I'm just shooting up and up and up. It's astounding. You just cannot believe what's happening on screen.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to get into all these characters we're introduced to. We're introduced to first I don't know if it's first, but at one point a huge charger zooms into the parking lot and is, revving that engine and parks sideways in the parking space just because he's cool and different and edgy. And out of that car comes our boy Zeke. Pause the movie, throw up the name Zeke, continue the movie, and he has the worst haircut I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, it's so bad.
He's very much trying to be... They set him up as, like, the cool kid, the rad dude. Literally just by showing you what these characters are doing, they're trying to establish what trope each character is, what high school 90s trope. Zeke is the cool kid. He sells drugs, like, immediately.
Yeah. He also is selling porn out of the back of his car.
Drugs and porn.
There's a funny moment in in this early sequence with Zeke where he actually is selling a kid, like, I guess a supposed sex tape of Neve Campbell, who is the lead in Scream.
Yeah, which is
kind of like a
fun little nod, yeah. Continuing, then we see, I don't know the order. We see Delilah, who's this, like, she's the pretty girl. She's the popular girl. And then she goes to kiss her boyfriend, who's Stan. He's the football guy. Then we see Stokely, the edgy goth girl. Then we see Mary Beth, the new girl. She's got a country accent. Then we see Casey, who's Elijah Wood. And I think that's the whole group of high schoolers. But
Yeah, that's our cast.
have you ever seen a poster for this movie? Have you seen the poster? Or the front
Yes,
cover?
I
If
have.
you'll notice, Usher is one of the group on the cover, and then in this movie, he is not one of the group. He's just like a background character.
Yeah, the poster also is an homage to the poster for Independence Day. It's got
Yeah.
this like bright light shining behind
Yeah.
the high school, which I think is really interesting. And then yeah, I didn't even notice the Usher thing. But I guess they had to market Usher, pretty heavily because I'm sure people went to this movie trying to see Usher in it. I mean, Usher was huge.
And you know what? Usher might as well have not been in it. He does
Oh.
barely anything. He's barely in it, and he adds nothing. It feels like they wrote him in so they could write in Usher. And then they put his face so prominently on the cover. He is not one of this main group. They literally name the main group. They go through this sequence where they introduce all of them, and he's not one of them. And there he is on the cover anyway.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. I mean, and it had to have been expensive, right, to have him in this movie?
Yeah, well, I guess that's why he's barely in the movie.
Right.
Okay, yeah, and they're all doing, like, whatever stereotypical thing they're doing. Stokely's, like, just walking around with a chip on her shoulder. Elijah Wood's getting beat up. Delilah and Stan are kissing. Zeke selling drugs. It's crazy. And then the next good deal of the movie, like 10 to 20 minutes, is all these characters. Just we're focusing on each one individually, what they're doing, just getting a feel for the characters, I guess. This feels like something the movie really emphasizes, is getting to know these characters, but it feels like a waste of time because they are complete tropes, complete stereotypes. But then later on in the movie, they do this incredibly shallow, cheap thing where they're like, they're not actually like their stereotypes. They're breaking the model. And then they each do one different thing contrary to their trope. They act like they pulled one over on the audience and that they're all different. But now it's like, instead of having one personality trait, they now have two personality traits, and they don't feel any more enriched for it. They just feel worse. They just feel even more poorly written.
They do that. It's really egregious when it comes down to Casey and Zeke. Because like Casey's whole thing is apparently, and they barely brush on this, but you can tell that they want it to be a big thing in the end of the movie, which we'll get into later. But Casey's whole thing is that like he's actually quite fast.
Oh,
did you notice that?
Dumb. Oh my god, yeah, because he can run from the bullies. That's like his whole bit.
Yeah,
is like they comment on how fast he is.
It's super dumb. They have Coach specifically comment on how fast he is, and then it comes up with his dad later on, and it comes up at the end of the movie. And then with Zeke, it's like Zeke sells drugs and porn, and he doesn't like school, and he's 19 but a senior, but he's quite sciencey.
And he's super smart, actually. He's subverting your expectations. He's different. He's really a genius. And
so stupid.
He is by far the worst written character, because like
terrible.
He's also a genius, and he also like, it's anytime they write a high schooler to be a genius, it's like, this is not real. This person does not exist, and it's painfully just manufactured.
It's bad. It's really, really bad.
The first scene where they start to allude to him being a genius is when he's in English class, and he makes some witty remark about how like this character actually is feeling this way, and then the English teacher's like, "That's really good, Zeke. Oh, you wrote it so nicely." I would also like to touch on how this English teacher exudes sexual energy, and like they clearly write her this way. All the interaction we see is her relationship with Zeke, so it's very much implied that like she's very attracted to Zeke, And she's
Really
like
heavy-handed.
really
Really
traditionally attractive too. And she talks like this. She's like, so Zeke, what do you think about this part of the book? Like she talks like that.
No, it's super ridiculous, super heavy-handed that she's attracted to him. And, they, of course, even stress the fact that he is 19. They stress the fact that he is a senior that failed, so he's a senior twice in a row. And it's obvious why they're doing that, to make this relationship more acceptable. And it's rough. It's very 90s.
Yeah, luckily they never get together. We never see that, but it's still like they started walking down a very dark path. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I was kind of wondering if they would just do it.
If this was any other, maybe a little earlier, maybe even 4 years earlier, they absolutely would have done it.
Probably, yeah.
God, yeah. So after as we're being introduced to these characters more, we're getting into what they're like, what they do on a normal day in this high school. We also start to get introduced to some of the staff. Selma Hayek's like a nurse who's sick all the time. That's her gimmick. There's a older woman, like a really old lady, and then there's this like just disgruntled, soulless, alcoholic teacher who like does not care about class. He's barely still got a job because he's wildly inappropriate.
Yeah.
And slowly each faculty member gets infected with the parasite until the entire school faculty is overrun by aliens. My teacher's an alien? Like that's the plot of this movie. And they're a hive mind, so they're all conforming. It's dumb. It's so dumb.
Yeah, the hive mind part is the part that's by far the least thought through. Because it doesn't make sense. They show that the parasites infect their hosts individually. And there's no real connection between them and another parasite. But then, like, midway through the movie, they want you that they do require, like, a queen to live.
Yeah. They share thoughts halfway through this movie. But also we see them talking to each other. And if they're hive minds, why can't they just telepathically communicate if it's a hive mind? But, not thought through. One of the indicators that someone is infected with the parasite is that they have to drink a bunch of water. Because, of course, these parasites live in water. And at one point, the coach tells the theater teacher, make sure you stay hydrated or something. And then he talks about their evil plans. But why do they need to talk? Why do they have to talk? This is dumb. This is ridiculous.
That's true. That's a great point.
Then after this, we get that scene with Casey bringing the parasite to his teacher, and everybody in class gets to see it. And I want to go a little bit more into this scene. First of all, he dumps the parasite in a fish tank. There's just an empty fish tank full of gallons of water at the back of his class. Cool. I don't know why. And then he starts like analyzing it. And he says, I think you've discovered a new species. It's unlike all other cephalopods because yada, yada, yada. This freaking high school biology teacher does not know. He doesn't know. He's just some schmo. He doesn't know every freaking species. He doesn't know if it's a new species. He's not an expert just because he's a high school biology teacher.
Well, and what's hilarious is this is such a thing. They did the same thing in Gremlins.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you won't.
You're a high school biology teacher. You're going to teach class.
Yeah. Oh, man. And for no reason, it's Jon Stewart.
Yeah, and it's Jon Stewart. He keeps talking about how he's going to send the specimen to the university. He doesn't say which university, but there's a university, evidently.
The Ohio State University.
The Ohio State University?
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, I hope it is. I'll assume. He he's doing all this science. He's saying, just giving all this information. It's dumb. He just innately knows a lot. After he's proven that he's a genius in biology, the parasite just duplicates, like control, copy, control, pastes itself. And now there's two, and he's like, it can replicate. And then he goes, maybe the texture's different. I'm gonna touch it. And he freaking sticks his hand in the aquarium and starts rubbing this parasite. In what world would you do that? Who?
Yeah,
and then it bites him, because of course it does.
And he's like, what?
Yeah, he's like, oh my god, it bit me. What? Of course it bit you. Do not rub animals. They're gonna bite you.
Well, and mind you, right, it bites him after they watch it, like, shoot out its tendrils. And it's like, no way in hell am I putting in this aquarium with this creature that has now sprouted tentacles. It's just, yeah. He deserves everything he gets.
Yeah, it's... This character... We'll just say this character is Jon Stewart, and that's why he's in the movie. Just to be Jon Stewart.
True.
I don't know. Moving on. Segue. We see our main characters interact more. Mary Beth is the new girl. She's from the South, and all she talks about is how y'all all seem strange. You're from the South. There's this recurring bit. They say this line. They make this joke at least 3 times, where they say, like, they start realizing the school's being taken over by aliens, and then some character will say, like, the only alien in this school is you, or I feel like the only alien in this school sometimes. And Mary Beth says, well, I'm from the South, and y'all all feel like aliens to me. I think she says at one point. It's this dumb joke they have to make.
This is where I realized that Robert Rodriguez did at the movie. Because Robert Rodriguez, of course, is from Texas. This movie was filmed in Texas. It was filmed in San Marcos, actually.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. It is very true. It was filmed in San Marcos and Austin, I believe.
I'm looking this up.
Look it up.
Oh my god, you're right.
Well, yeah, Robert Rodriguez always works in Texas.
That's hilarious.
All the time.
Why does it take place in Ohio?
Well, he didn't write the script, like I said.
I guess it's true.
And they gave him the script later on. And you can totally tell, because this Southern character is the biggest Southern caricature maybe I've ever seen.
Her name is Mary Beth, and she is from the South, and she talks like that.
Talks literally just like what Adam is describing. It's bad, too. It's not a good accent.
She is her stereotype.
Yeah.
For sure. All these characters are. Then there's Stokely. Stokely might be my favorite because she's. I said Zeke's the worst character. Stokely might be the worst character. She makes no sense.
Yeah, the entire movie, Delilah calls her a lesbian.
Yeah, she's like, it's crazy. Like, Delilah would just come up to her and just, like, insult and berate her and, like, call her a lesbian and just go on about it, like, out of the blue. Like, Delilah is not hateable when you're just following her, when the camera's following her, and then she'll go to Stokely and just bash her. And it's like, whoa. Yeah, it's like, whoa.
Like, absolutely no reason.
It comes from nowhere.
And then, of course, she's not a lesbian.
Yeah, I love that. This fucking queer baiting, she's not even a lesbian.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. They should have just made her a lesbian.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. And in the end, of course, she ends up with the quarterback.
Yeah. So at the end of the movie, like I said, they've been alluding to these. They're not quite like their stereotypes. By the end of the movie, she's suddenly not goth. She's wearing like a pink shirt and she's dating the quarterback. And it's so stupid. It's so dumb.
They made her change clothes.
Yeah.
Like, why? Why can't she date the quarterback and be goth?
Yeah, that's another thing in these movies that I feel like I've seen this before in a movie, that it's one of these things that's like so poorly written. Like she would just change everything about herself. She just needed to like get friends or something, and now suddenly she's not goth. Like that would never happen. This has never happened. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
She can't be goth anymore. She can't do it. It's like this bad association with the goth culture. Like, what? That she's goth? That's a little weird. It reeks of being a boomer. It reeks. It's the most boomer thing to be like, well, she's just sad because she's goth.
Yeah. And this is the sort of thing that this movie is riddled with.
Yeah.
As we've described.
Boomer writing. Absolutely. She just needed to get with the football kids so they could date. And then this football guy, he's the head of the football team. He's the head quarterback. And his whole bit is he wants to quit the team because he wants to focus on his academics, because he feels like all he is to other people is a quarterback, and he wants to be more. He wants to be himself. And he starts telling people that he wants to quit, and everybody immediately just shits all over him. His girlfriend, Delilah, is like incredibly abusive to him emotionally. Like they're not in a relationship. She tells him, I'm dating you for clout, and if you quit the team, I will quit dating you because you're an idiot. And you're dumb. And if you quit the team, you'll just be a dumb guy. And I'm not just going to date some dumb guy. And it's like, damn, Delilah.
And his friends just stopped hanging out with him?
Yeah, they're like, you're not on the football team? We hate you now. It's ridiculous. It's so crazy. They hate him for it. Usher hates on him for it.
Usher was a welcome sight in this movie.
I feel like Usher did not need to be in this movie. It feels just out of place. Like it's a cameo, but it doesn't work. It really doesn't make sense for him to be in this movie. Like if he was going to be in this movie, just be a cameo, you know? Like have a prom scene where everybody performs, you know, he performs at the end or something. The way they integrate him does not make sense. It's really bizarre. Maybe something happened behind the scenes writing-wise. Maybe he was supposed to be like one of the main characters, but then it didn't make sense with the plot or something, so they wrote him into this side character. I don't know. It's really weird. It feels like meddling happened with this character. I don't know. I'm just...
Yeah, it's quite possible.
This is just conjecture, but I don't know. Something went wrong with this character.
I guess we might as well just get into the big moment. Okay, so Casey, you could tell he has a little crush on Delilah, this cool girl character who also runs the school newspaper. I'm not sure if you mentioned that already.
Yeah, she does, and Casey is the photographer for the school newspaper.
Right. Casey and Delilah, they go into the teacher's lounge because, of course, Delilah, being the head of the newspaper, wants to follow the story. And they see there Coach Willis and Miss Olsen, I believe is her name, the drama teacher, attacking the school nurse. And, you know, it happens off screen because they're hidden in a closet in the teacher's lounge, so they don't actually see what happens. But we do gather that, of course, she is infected by them. While they're in the closet, they find the body of this old teacher that's there. They set it up a little bit earlier. They find her body, and it's like withered and mummified. They find it hidden in the closet. And they bolt out of the closet. Of course, Coach Willis and Miss Olsen see this, and they follow them out. But the catch is that the nurse follows with them, and they all agree that everything is fine. The police get involved. Casey basically begs his parents to believe him, and they don't. There's this entire sequence where they like come to the school, they talk to the principal. Of course, all of these adults are infected. And then they're at the school while Casey is with his parents. The principal invites one of the police that goes to investigate into the office, and he watches him enter the office and then leave completely changed. His demeanor, everything. And Casey knows that, something is happening here. He is grounded at home, but he can confide in the folks at school. So he gathers this ragtag group of misfits in Mr. Furlong's room when Mr. Furlong isn't there. And he tells Stan and Stokely, along with Delilah, what he thinks is happening, that the teachers are being controlled by some alien life form.
Yeah, and Delilah's at least there to vouch for him. He has at least one person in this situation who witnessed it and believes him. Just before he gathers these people, he, gets Stokely in the room by, I think he goes up to her and he's like, Stokes, I need you. Come help me. And then she does, and they act like they're just cool, like they're buds. Like they're just really good friends. And you never see this before now. This is their first interaction on screen, I think. And, they're just homies all of a sudden. It's kind of like it feels like a few scenes were missing. They got on the cutting room floor or something.
Not to mention, she makes a huge deal, Stokely does, about not liking people and not wanting friends.
Yeah, not having any friends.
Yeah. But nonetheless.
Yeah, Mary Beth's really trying to befriend her, and she's not having any of it. So it's all of a sudden they're besties, and it's weird, but whatever.
And speaking of Mary Beth and Zeke are off in another room, and you can tell that Zeke is attracted to Mary Beth, and he's trying to get with her. Well, while that's happening, they overhear this conversation that Casey is leading through a vent. And then they burst in the room and start making fun of them for what they're saying. But this is this, of course, is going to set into motion the remainder of the events of the movie. Because now we have everybody in the room hearing the plan, hearing what Casey believes is happening. And then Mr. Furlong walks in and he catches them in his room.
Yeah.
And Mr. Furlong, of course we learn, has been infected.
Yeah.
To this scene's credit, they get right to it. Mr. Furlong basically immediately attacks them.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. The students that aren't Delilah and Casey basically tell him, they think that aliens are running the school, but we don't believe them. And then he attacks them in his alien form. It's like, no, convince them you're not an alien.
Yeah, he does none of that. They get right into it. But I liked that. Personally, I wouldn't have wanted a whodunit at this point, because
whodunit. Yeah, it would have been tiresome.
The movie is an hour and 40 minutes long, and I think we're well into the 45-minute mark at this point, and I want to see some stuff happen.
Yeah.
Now there is an entire struggle here. In the beginning, Mr. Furlong in his alien form, and we should clarify, they don't look like aliens. They look like themselves, but they are stronger and obviously more violent.
They have tentacles that come out of their face and stuff.
Right. They can use tentacles that come out, and tendrils. But after a long struggle, Zeke, who, remember, has been peddling this mysterious powder drug. It's not cocaine. It's something he makes with household chemicals. He uses these pens full of this mysterious powder and stabs it into Mr. Furlong's eye while he's trying to defend himself from Mr. Furlong's attack. And he finds out that diuretics actually kill the aliens. Mr. Furlong, his eye begins to foam up and he starts foaming at the mouth and he falls to the ground in what is probably one of the better effects in this movie, and shrivels and withers in a foamy goop. And now we know their weakness.
Yeah, so these drugs dehydrate the parasite in their brain, and that kills them, evidently. We see this happen a few times, but now it is established, these drugs kill the aliens. The scene after this, they all start to question each other. Maybe you're an alien. Maybe Stokely's an alien. Maybe Stan's an alien. And they determine the only way they can prove that they're not aliens is by doing drugs. And that's so 90s. So they're all going around taking hits of these drugs, and for the rest of the movie, every so often they just have to do drugs in the middle of the action. And it's so over the top, so ridiculous. And now they're all high.
Yeah, and then they get high, and off this, like, again, mystery drug. At one point, Zeke says that it's caffeine and other things, other household things. So I don't know really what this would do to you. Like, make you energetic, but they, like, are laughing and loopy.
Yeah, it's like an ecstasy. I don't know. I don't know.
Super, super weird.
Well, when they have this scene, they go into Zeke's lab. You assume he gets these drugs from somewhere. No. He makes them in his basement in a Frankenstein's lab. He has, like, beakers with green liquid that are foaming, a bunch of crazy tubes. It is cartoon evil scientist lab, and this is where he makes the drugs. Because he's a genius.
He's so smart. But this is what he puts his energy into.
Yeah, he's smart, but he's just misguided.
There's a line that Zeke says regarding himself earlier on in the movie where he says, "I know, walking contradiction." And it's terrible.
Yeah, this man's writing is as bad as his hair. It's...
Oh, God. I don't know, that's hard to top.
Yeah. Well, they're all high. Seeing Elijah Wood, like, high as hell as everybody's doing this stuff. He's, like, laughing throughout this entire scene, and then all the other people start doing drugs, then they start laughing. And everybody who's not high is, like, holding guns to each other's head. It's, like, very tense. And now that these characters are on drugs and they're laughing in the background, it's less tense. I think it's supposed to be more tense. It's like, oh no, now all this is happening and drugs are in the mix. But it's just goofy. A big problem is all of their laughter sounds so fake. They're so many of them are so bad at fake laughing and just pretending to be high, and it's dumb. It's so dumb.
It's a tough sequence to get through.
Yeah.
And there is a serious moment in the sequence. You find out that Delilah doesn't want to take the hit of the stuff. And, of course, this reveals that she is infected with the parasite. And she is able to escape from them. They do have this terrible, terrible shot of her, like, once the reveal happens, of the parasites crawling through her face, which is hilarious because it really only takes one to infect every person. But for some reason, now they've established that you have, like, 6 crawling around in you. I think they only did it for the shot, for the reveal. But nonetheless, she is able to kind of destroy Zeke's lab equipment before she escapes, which, of course, hurts their supply.
Yeah. And the only way they can get more is if they go to his car. So the next day they're back in school. They literally are like, okay, so the aliens are real. We know how to destroy them. Stokely, you're goth. You know about horror movies. What would happen in a horror movie? And she says, we have to kill the alien queen, and that'll turn everybody back to normal. And the logic here is literally, she saw it in a movie once. Let's try it, and it works. That's how they formulate their plan.
Yep.
It's so stupid.
Well, in a lot of ways, I understand why they did this, because I know that they're trying to... they're doing their best to, like, call back to these golden age, like, body invasion movies. But it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good at all.
Yeah, it's an homage to much better films.
That's true. Yeah.
But after they get back in school, there's a football game. And this is when you realize most of the school is now infected. The football team is infecting the other football team. And they are looking around and they're realizing, like, they're the only people not infected in the school. So they have to, as a group, like, pretend to be infected and just try to walk out and escape before they get got. And the rest of the movie is very, like, we're the only ones left. We have to find the queen before and save everybody. They determine the principal is probably the queen. So they get her in the gym and they shoot her in the head to kill the parasite. And in a very somber, sobering shot, or scene, she gets shot in the head and falls to the ground, and blood just starts to pool out from under her, and nothing changes. She's just dead now. They just shot their principal in the head. She's dead.
And they all start to argue, we must have made a mistake.
Yeah, and they did. She was a parasite, but she wasn't the parasite. Somehow her head gets decapitated too, and then tentacles come out of the stump, and she crawls back to her body, I believe.
Oh, it's so bad too. It looks terrible.
Yeah. So they run away. They all are outside somehow. Stan gets cut off from them, and he runs back and he's like, open the door, let me in, please, they're gonna get me. And they're like, no, Stan. How do we know that you're not one of them yet? How do we know they didn't get you? And they do this dramatic thing where they're like, here, they throw a pin under the door. They're like, do it, Stan, please. And he puts it to his nose, and then he drops it. He doesn't snort it because he is infected. And they'll have to run. And Stokely's having this huge crisis because the boy she loves is now gone and replaced by an alien. And it's very dramatic. They start getting picked off one by one. And they get to the gym. And I think this is the finale where it is revealed that Mary Beth is the alien queen. And I hated this reveal because it feels like they didn't know who the queen would be until they got to the end of the script and they thought, let's make Mary Beth the queen. She behaves like a human. She has emotion. This whole, as you're getting to know the characters portion of the beginning of the movie, she's like fervently trying to befriend Stokely. Like, she thinks Stokely doesn't have any friends, and she's the new girl. She doesn't have any friends either, and she really wants to be friends with her. Why would an alien do any of that? Why would she go through all the trouble? Why would she have this emotional drive? It makes no sense. And then this movie has the idea of, like, subverting expectations, you know. Zeke's a walking contradiction. Stokely doesn't really want to be goth, and she's not even a lesbian. Casey's super fast, I guess. But Maribeth, no. They lean into the stereotype. The new girl is an alien, literally.
Yeah, I completely agree. It felt really half-baked. And, I don't know, there's no build-up to the reveal. Like, she just is the queen, and then eventually she is killed. And I guess, like, the end sequence is cool. They establish that she can shapeshift in and out of her alien queen form.
Yeah, she gets tentacles instead of arms.
Yeah. But it's I don't know, it's really anticlimactic. And not to mention, the same rule applies to the queen, where, like, a tiny pen full of, like, caffeine powder kills her. And mind you, she is massive. Like, when she's in her, like, actual alien form, she's massive and scary. But the tiny pen will do it.
Yeah.
It's like all this buildup and to nothing.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Then she describes how she was faking the drug. She, in a very dumb looking sequence, show her put the pen to her nose, and then her pinky finger turns into a tentacle and unscrews the bottom of the pen, and the drugs fall out.
They totally retcon the powder scene because they show her sniff it.
Yeah, it's one of those scenes where it's like, clearly this is not what happened, just because it would be so obvious if it did.
Right.
Oh, it feels like they made 2/3 of this movie and then didn't finish the script, and then right here and now cranked it out and finished it.
Yeah.
After they get picked off one by one, they're all getting infected. Casey's, I think, the last one. The alien queen's chasing him, and he outruns her because he's fast. He gets her trapped in the bleachers. They like close automatically, I guess, and they trap this creature, which is where he can stab the alien in the eye, which kills it, and that saves the day and everything. I don't know, it feels rushed, half-baked, not consistent with how the rest of the movie, the direction the movie had been going in.
Yeah, I agree. It's a pretty anticlimactic ending to an otherwise enjoyable movie. But I still had fun with it. You know, I still enjoyed it overall. It's a shame that Mary Beth, you know, by far the biggest caricature, one of the most uninteresting characters in the movie, is like the big reveal.
Yeah.
I think that's where this movie loses a lot of water, no pun intended. But yeah. I'm still glad we watched it.
Oh yeah, I am too. And then after the queen dies, everybody just like goes back to normal.
Yeah.
Principal Drake got shot in the head and then decapitated. Like she's just gonna go back to normal. She got messed up. She is dead.
Yeah, they do a whole cut where it's like 1 month later.
And 1 month later.
Everything is fine. This is where we see that Stokely is no longer goth. She's cured.
And she's dating Stan, who's no longer on the football team.
Right. He's also cured.
And then Zeke is the new head quarterback. He goes from drug dealer not even playing football to head quarterback in 1 month. They don't establish he's good at sports. That he's a genius. But now he's on the football team.
And then Casey is, of course, a local hero.
Yeah.
He's all over the news. They show him, like, avoiding interviews on campus.
Yo, yeah. Like, literally the paparazzi come for him. And, like, a million different news channels. Like, every day he's being hounded by news channels from across America so they can get the scoop. And he's super popular. And he's dating Delilah, the most popular girl in school. And she's no longer, like, she no longer sucks, I guess.
Everyone's been cured of their previous affliction.
Yeah, everybody's been cured. I don't know. I didn't expect Casey to be focused on this much. They act like at the beginning of the movie, it's very much like an ensemble. There's no main character. It's this group, and they all add something to the group that will help them. But then by the end of the movie, it's just Casey's the main character. He's saving the world.
Yeah. I
don't know. I love this movie. I love this movie so much.
No, I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's really fun. I think it's got the perfect runtime at 104 minutes. It doesn't really drag. And it's, you got a great director in Robert Rodriguez behind the camera. You've got an at least interesting script written by Kevin Williamson, who's reputable. It's good. It's good. This movie, of course, did not have great reviews when it first came out. That is not shocking, but it's picked up a cult following.
Yeah.
And you can totally see why. It wears its influences on its sleeve. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Thing, maybe even Breakfast Club, right?
Yeah. Group of high schoolers got to band together to break their stereotypes.
Right. But it's fun. It's really, really fun. And it's maybe one of my favorites that we've covered thus far. Just because I had no idea it existed. And it's streaming on HBO Max, so anybody can watch it.
Yeah, please. If you can watch this movie. It's a blast. It is like Breakfast Club. It's trying to do this like rebel, don't conform like the aliens be different, don't be your stereotype, but it does it so poorly. So poorly.
For sure. It's not a well-made movie. It's not good, but it's awesome.
Watch this movie. That's all I can say. I had a blast.
Me too. Thank you for recommending it.
I'm so glad we got to see it. Of course.
I'll go listen to I'm 18 by Creed.
Yeah. By Creed.
Yeah.
I'm going to go listen to The Offspring. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Adrian, for joining me.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.